And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to welcome tonight debut author Peter Malone Elliott here to give us the inside scoop on his brand new book, Blue Ridge. Peter, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to everyone watching. So Blue Ridge, as it suggests, it is a psychological thriller set in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia about two identical twin brothers, Cillian and Christopher Clarke. Cillian is a burned out horse trainer, a former Olympic equestrian, kind of on his last legs, mentally, metaphorically, and literally. You'll understand the literally if you read the book. And then Christopher is the exact opposite. He's a rising star in the political world. He's running for governor of Virginia. On the surface, he's kind of got it all figured out, right? The book picks up, Cillian is en route to go murder Christopher. Only when he gets to Christopher's house, he finds out that someone has beat him to the punch and framed him for the deed. So obviously Cillian has to go on the run, and in order to figure out why he's been framed and to clear his name, to figure out who killed Christopher, he gets launched into this really nefarious political conspiracy that also threatens a deep, dark secret that Cillian and Christopher have done a lot to keep buried.
Well, I'm so excited to chat with you about all of these things. The book hooked me because I am obsessed with twins. I wish I was a twin. I'm never going to fully get over it that I'm not. And so as soon as I heard it was about identical twins, I was like, I must read this book. So we have so much to chat about. So we're going to get right into it as soon as I welcome everybody. So we are broadcasting live to 6 different destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So hey, mystery and thriller loving friends, no matter where you are watching from, you're in the right place. It is the right time. It is Mystery Monday. And because Mondays can be murder, we're going to get your week off to a killer start and make them a little less painful. If you know what to do because you've been here before, fabulous, get it going. And if you're new, welcome, friends. We're so happy to have you. Here's how it works. Every Monday, I give you my handpicked featured authors, and you get to ask them anything. So ask Peter about these murderous twins. Ask him about where he got the idea from, what his writing practice is like, anything you want to ask. What happens on Mystery and Thriller Mavens stays on Mystery and Thriller Mavens, much like Vegas, but more murder. So just get your questions going in the comments. I'll get them right over to Peter. Chris joining us from YouTube saying hello again, Sara, and so excited to hear from Peter all about his book. Chris, welcome. Thanks for joining us again. So good to see you. So Peter, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got the idea for this book about these murderous twins?
Yeah, sure. So I come from a screenwriting background, and it was at the height of the pandemic, and I really wanted to tackle writing a novel. And I've always been fascinated, like you, Sara, by twins, identical twins specifically, and what that could mean and what that would look like in a thriller. You know, the idea of two people being always considered part of an entity instead of their own individual things. It was just a fascinating jumping off point. And I was living in Virginia, and so I was next to the Blue Ridge Mountains. I spent a lot of time going there, and I was looking at these beautiful mountains. They're gorgeous, but they're haunting and they're spooky at the same time. And once I got the idea for, okay, I want one of the brothers to want to murder the other, and I want to set it in the Blue Ridge Mountains, it was kind of all systems go from there. Yeah, I mean, it was a pleasure to write, and I got to do dueling first person POVs, which each chapter is alternating perspectives, one from Cillian, one from Christopher. And that was a really fascinating thing to do because I wouldn't have been able to do that in a screenplay, you know?
So Peter, your background is in screenwriting.
Yeah.
Why did you want to write a book? Why didn't you want to stick with just the screenwriting?
Well, so I'm the son of an illustrious New York Times bestselling novelist. So writing a novel was kind of always something that was on the back burner of my brain. It was always something I wanted to try. It was just a matter of like when I would get around to doing it. And, you know, as I've found writing novels, and now I'm focusing pretty much exclusively on writing novels, it's so much more fun than writing screenplays. You get to do so much more. You get to really get into the heads of the characters. You really get to, you know, just explore, you know, the nuances of the human condition in a way that you can't in a screenplay. So, you know, throughout my career, I'm planning to toggle back and forth between both, but I'm really enjoying writing novels right now.
John, welcome to the conversation, joining us from Northeast Ohio. John, so good to have you. Thanks for tuning in. Peter, how long did it take you to write this book?
So I started writing it in January 2021, and I finished it. And by finished, I mean doing all the revisions and all that. I finished it about a year later. So it's about a year all in. Yeah.
And what did you find was the hardest thing coming over from screenwriting?
So the hardest thing was definitely with screenwriting, you have to be really concise, right? You have to, in a book, you can take 3 paragraphs to describe a setting. In a screenplay, you have a sentence, if you're lucky, probably less. So I would find myself a lot of times in the initial draft, I would be underwriting because I was so afraid of overwriting and sticking to my screenwriting training that I was leaving some things off of the page, right? So that was probably the biggest initial adjustment I had to make, was trusting myself. It's like, okay, you're not overwriting. This is your screenwriting brain kicking in. Ignore that. Just dive in full force and just you'll be fine. So that was probably the switch I had to flip initially. Yeah.
Was going deeper into those moments.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So how was your experience with working with your editor? Was it, inviting you deeper to go into those moments? Was that the feedback that you were getting, or was it, something else?
Yeah, it was lucky. I have a really good set of beta readers, friends of mine that I trust their opinion. So I gave them, once I was done with the draft, I gave them, the draft. It was about 3 or 4 of them, and the feedback was all pretty good. It was more just kind of amping up the things that already existed. There wasn't any heavy, it's not like I had to go in and just chop out massive sections and do major CPR on the manuscript, which was nice. It was really just kind of just fine tuning what was there. And then once I got to the publishing phase with Level Best, my publisher, it was mostly cosmetic stuff. There weren't any really major revisions that I had to do, which was lucky. So
excellent. So when you say you took you a year to write the book, you mean before you shared it with your beta readers, or inclusive of their feedback?
Inclusive of their feedback.
Wow, that's really fast, especially for a first book.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I tend to write really quickly. Again, I think that's my screenwriting brain. I can usually write a script in about a month. With the book, especially since it was my first go around, it took a little bit longer. But I just finished a second book, and I wrote that in about 5 months. So it's everybody's process is different, right?
Yeah. So did you find that you identified with with one twin more than the other?
That's a great question. I don't want to play favorites. I love them both, even though they're both very flawed. I will say that it was interesting to see that even though Cillian is probably considered the protagonist of the book, I found it easier to write Christopher. Christopher's voice was more like my own. Not to say that he's like me, but it was much easier to dip into writing Christopher than it was to Cillian. Cillian, I had to dig pretty deep, and really do some soul searching in order to get the voice right. And I think I did, but that's up for the readers to decide. So,
can you tell us more about the soul searching?
Yeah. I mean, once you read the book, you'll know Cillian is a really damaged character. He's been through a lot of trauma, and he's someone that is a little bit of a recluse, particularly, mostly by design, but he's someone that's very guarded and very not necessarily forthcoming with his true feelings, and that's very much the opposite of the way I am. I'm very, very upfront with how I'm feeling, and I'm very transparent. So that was probably the biggest thing I had to click into. Is like, okay, someone who thinks like this, they wouldn't want to say what they're feeling. How would they articulate what they're feeling without actually saying it? Whereas Christopher was very much, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm feeling. This is what's on my brain. Here it is. So it was the dichotomy that was interesting. Oh,
Margaret, welcome to the conversation. Joining us from Portland, Oregon. She says, Happy New Year, Sarah. Happy New Year, lady. She says, Peter, do you do your best writing and drafting at home in an office or out in a coffee shop, of which there are many in Brooklyn?
there are many. And also I love Portland. So hello. I do occasionally write in coffee shops, but I have to admit I've got a pretty good office setup here. So I tend to kind of hunker down in here and crank out most stuff in my office. But every now and again, when I need to change the scenery, I'll hit a coffee shop. Yeah. So like sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So Peter, when you are, writing Peter's perspective in these alternating chapters that whose voice you found easier to access, because I think I read my book is told through 4 points of view, and one of the best pieces of advice that I had read when writing a multiple perspective book is that the reader should be able to know whose chapter it is without any name tags, because the voices should be so different. And I know when I first started mine, they all kind of sounded alike, and they all kind of sounded a lot like me. And it took a lot of work and refinement to really differentiate them.
Yeah.
How did you address that? And what do you think the key to doing that well is?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I mean, the tricky thing about this was because they're identical twins, right? They had to be different, obviously, but not so different, right? You kind of wanted to play with that dynamic, right? So they had to be just different enough, to tell the difference. But I think probably the thing that helped me with that the most was I tend to do character bios when I'm writing. So I write out the backstory of a character and their background and their mannerisms and how they talk. And sometimes I'll even write out dialogue, just free form. It's like, okay, I'm just having a conversation in a coffee shop as Christopher. What would he say? Sometimes I even do that. And that's how I kind of picked up the subtle differences that made it, tasty, right? So like Christopher is a lot more polished and clean. He's a politician, so he's very used to selling himself and putting on the smile, right? Whereas Cillian is the exact opposite of that. He's much more soft-spoken. He's not as brash. He's much more reserved and withdrawn. And he'll say, whereas Christopher would say something in 3 sentences, Cillian would say it in 3 words, right? So that was probably the biggest thing that led me into the differentiations.
So what do you think each of these twins would say to you in a coffee shop?
Well, Cillian would probably be doing a James Dean impression in the corner, kind of like smoldering and not saying a lot. And everyone would be kind of looking like, who's that guy? Is he all right? Like, is he good? And then Christopher would probably find me in line and be chatting about some really pretentious blend of coffee beans that I've never heard of in my life, and probably like just kind of monologue about that. And I would nod and be like, yeah, okay. And then get my coffee and get the hell out of there. So, that's probably the difference. Yeah.
Because I think one of the things, as someone with siblings, I think one of the things that is most interesting is how different people perceive themselves and their siblings, as well as how different siblings remember things in families. Now, I know you're not an only child as well. And have you had that experience in your life? And did you infuse that into the book?
Yes, I've never wanted to kill my sister. I'll say that from the jump.
I'm sure she's really relieved to hear that.
Yeah, Megan, I promise I never wanted to do that. The thing that is always interesting about siblings is the rivalry, right? Even if you two are incredibly close and you love each other a lot, there always is a little bit of an unspoken tension between you that's kind of always just simmering beneath the surface. Sometimes it manifests itself in big ways, and sometimes it's just microaggressions and stuff like that, right? So I was lucky that Megan and I had a really good relationship. So I didn't have to put a whole lot of like autobiographical things in there. I kind of had to use my imagination a little bit.
So just the microaggressions.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Oh my God, hilarious. Margaret wants to know about the character bios that you write. Do you keep all of this background in a story Bible, or is that
Ooh.
more of a film and theater thing? Great question, Margaret.
That is a great question. I also did theater too, so yay theater. Woo. I wouldn't say I keep it in like a formal story Bible. It's mostly, as dumb as it sounds, just like the notes section on my computer or the phone, kind of just free forming. So I wouldn't say it's like super organized, but it's organized enough that I know what's going on and I'm able to dip into it without like reading and going, what the hell was I saying? You know, so it's organized for me.
Perfect. And for all of the non-theater people out here, what the heck is a story Bible?
Well, it depends. If you ask different people, they'll give you a different definition. My interpretation of a story Bible is when you get a character assignment, you really dive in deep to imagining yourself as this person and write out basically their whole life, you know, and literally from their birth to their present day now. So I didn't do something quite that intensive, but I could see how that could be a really useful technique for writers. So
interesting. I've never done that.
Yeah.
We have another Margaret. Welcome, Margaret L. She wants to know, do Christopher and Cillian each think they need to act some way because they're expected to? By the way, Margaret, welcome.
Wow. That's an interesting question. Interesting. I would say Christopher definitely is much more putting on a front than Cillian is. So I think in a weird way, Christopher, even though he's more kind of the affable, more dynamic, quote unquote, one, I think he's probably putting on more of a front than Cillian, because he feels like he's, okay, I'm the one running for office. I'm the politician. Everyone loves me. They see me on TV. I have to act a certain way in order for people to elect me, right? So I think Christopher definitely. Cillian, I don't think as much. No, I think Cillian. I don't think Cillian believes in putting on a front at all. Yeah.
Interesting. Margaret, thank you for the great question.
Really good question.
And now we have Margaret P wants to know. She says, I love hearing the Crown actors. Oh my God, I love the Crown, Margaret. Tell what word or phrase got them into the register for their characters, kind of like voices for writing, I suppose.
Ooh. So the question would be how I got into the voices of the brothers, I suppose.
I think this is open for interpretation. Let's take it that way.
Okay, interesting. Cillian's voice, if you read the book, they're both from Virginia, so they're both Southern, right? But they're different versions of Southern. Cillian definitely has a little bit more of a drawl and a little bit more of a melodious way of talking, which I think is reflected in
up and hams up, depending if it benefits him, which I would say is putting on a front with Summer.
Interesting.
I mean,
interesting. Yeah, fair enough. But then he quickly drops it, though. Yeah.
That's what putting up a front is, Peter. Putting it up and dropping it. That's literally the definition.
Fair enough. I'm sorry, I completely lost the.
That's okay. So we're talking about getting into the register for the characters. What word or phrase? Getting into the register. So we have Cillian. You're talking about different Southern.
Yeah. So
Peter has a cold. He's hyped up on cold meds.
Yeah, sorry.
That's why we're getting the real tea. I'm going to require everyone to be hopped up on cold meds from now
on. Cillian, definitely, like I was saying, he's definitely more of a melodious way of talking. There's a description in the book about the Blue Ridge Mountains being like the music of Patsy Cline, and it's very
famous Virginia girl there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that honestly, when I figured out that was something that he would say, that kind of determines like, okay, this is someone who can kind of pull phrases like that out of his ass all the time, you know? So like he was definitely more melodious. Whereas Christopher, I knew from the jump that he was more clipped and direct. And, you know, I mean, like, even though he's very intelligent, he's not as much of a country philosopher as Cillian would be, I suppose, would be the way of putting it.
Oh my God, I love it. Chris, welcome to the conversation. Joining us from YouTube. She wants to know, at what point of the writing process do you go back and read your manuscript from the beginning as a continuity and plot hole check? Great question, Chris.
That is a good question. I know that there are people that do vomit drafts, and I think there's a lot of validity to that. I don't do that. I edit as I go. I don't move on to another chapter unless I'm completely happy with what came before it. So I'm kind of constantly revising. So like hopefully by the time that I'm done with my first draft, it's really more like a third or fourth draft by the amount of revisions I've kind of been doing continuously. So, it depends on the person. There are people that really swear by the vomit drafts, and that works for them. That's great.
So when do you go back? You don't go, or do you?
Well, I mean, because I'm editing continuously as I write, by the time I've finished, I'm pretty happy with what I've done. And then obviously when I send it out and get notes, then I'll dive in and revise things. But I'm constantly tinkering as I go. So that's
on that chapter until it's done, or on all subsequent chapters before you write them.
All subsequent chapters.
So by that measure, the last chapter, if you have, and I'm blanking on exactly how many chapters you have, but
20.
Sorry, what?
20.
So by that measure, chapter 20 has been edited once, and chapter 1 has been edited 19 times.
Well, okay. Once I turn in the draft,
we gotta get down to it, Peter. We need details.
Once I turn in the draft, then obviously before I turn in the draft, I will look at the whole thing again before. So like, no, it's not like I'm just finishing chapter 20 and then going, all right, done. Here you go. But I would say probably because of the method that I use, the opening chapters probably do get the most amount of passes. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah.
That's so interesting. There's another author, I'm totally blanking on her name, on Long Island, and she does the same thing. She rereads the prior chapter. Yeah. And I asked her the same thing. I'm like, so, but then are you polishing those more? And she said, yes, but they need it more.
Yeah, so, I really agree with that, because I mean, when you reread as you go, you're living it and breathing it, and it's in your head so much. So like by the time that you get to the later chapters, you know the story so mumuch better than what you knew it before when you were starting the opening chapters, right? Yeah, so I would agree with that a lot. I'm going to steal that. That's great.
Steal it. I think John Land, who is an incredible author of 65 books and a book reviewer, just said, good writers borrow, great writers steal. So now you're a great writer, Peter, now that you've officially stolen.
I did it. I'm done.
Margaret P. saying, Notepad, the underrated app of the century, LOL. Ooh. Okay, now I need to start using Notepad, I guess, because that's where you said you think your character bio, right?
Yeah. What is Notepad? I don't even know what that is. What is that?
I don't know. Oh, wait. Didn't you just say you use that app to do your character bios?
I use the Notes app on my phone and computer, but I think Notepad is a specific type of app, unless I'm conflating the two.
Oh my God. I don't know. It could be the Coldmans, or it could be that we're not in
it could
the
be.
Cool
It's
Kid
dealer's
in the
choice.
Group, Margaret. Either of these things can be true. Margaret P, let us know what you're talking about over there. Okay, Chris wants to know, is a story Bible the same as a character Bible? I don't know, Peter.
I think it depends on who you ask. For me, it would be similar, yeah. But you ask 5 different writers, you're going to get 5 different answers. So.
Margaret L saying, thank you. She's a non-theater person here too. Story Bibles sound like my diary. Is this true? Is it your diary, Peter?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, like a diary or journal is a pretty apt comparison. Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Margaret P is a Patsy Cline fan as well. Oh my God, that woman's beautiful, beautiful voice.
Best.
Chris saying she finds that because the manuscript is so long, she says I have to go back and reread from the beginning on occasion just to make sure I'm staying on point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the other thing, because you'll be like, for me, when I was in chapter 17, I was like, there were times I was struggling to remember. I was like, okay, what did I say in chapter 3? What is going on? So yeah, no, I mean that's part of it too. If you're constantly rereading, it's staying fresh, and you don't have to kind of just sort through the filing cabinets of your brain. It's there, Yeah.
Margaret P saying, so Peter builds from the ground up while we pantsers build our castles starting in the air. Are you a plotter, Peter?
Depends on the project. I will say though, I never start writing without knowing three things.
What are the three things?
I always know the opening image. I always
Ooh.
know that. I always know the midpoint, and I always know the end.
And that didn't change.
No.
So you knew the book would open with Cillian in his beat up old Ford truck with the Bluetooth system that Summer had paid to install, hauling that horse trailer to Virginia on his way to go kill his brother.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Margaret is saying that Notepad is what comes on the Apple system. Okay, right. I have a PC. I don't know. Okay. Yeah. Chris is saying, yes. Margaret L says, Peter, what would happen if you suddenly thought of something for your ending and it's not your very next chapter? Would you just throw some foreshadowing in, or would you stop and get the end idea down? For me, that would be like a little like finding the frame pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. I never skip a corner piece.
Interesting. So if you suddenly thought of something for your ending and it's not for your next chapter. Yeah, I mean, the thing about the fun about genre pieces, right, especially thrillers and mystery, is that you always kind of have to be laying the track, right? And if you're not laying the track, especially with a twisty book like this, the ending's not going to work, right? So yeah, I mean, like if when I was thinking of stuff, plot points, because I knew the beginning, the middle, and the end, right? But I didn't necessarily know how I was going to get to the end from the middle and vice versa. So yeah, I mean, like if I saw something, if I thought of something, I would figure out a way to work it in and foreshadow it for sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think Margaret's asking though, if you thought of something for the end, would you skip to the end, write that in, then come back to where you're working?
Oh, interesting.
Or would you just write in some foreshadowing as a note to yourself? I believe that's what you're saying.
I see. Sorry.
Because you're saying if you take it from rereading each chapter, then writing the next one, rereading this chapter, then writing the next one. So, but what if you think of something brilliant for the end? Would you let yourself skip ahead, or no, you wouldn't?
No, I wouldn't. No, I never skip around. No, I always write sequentially. Yeah.
Peter, disciplined writer. You guys, Peter has come on to give us the inside scoop on his book. It is not even out yet. This is a very exclusive pre-launch Q&A. So whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, here is the link to pre-order Blue Ridge. So click and get your little mitts on this book about Cillian and Christopher and the murderous twins, and let us know what you think. Do you identify with Cillian more? Do you identify with Christopher more? Is Cillian putting up a front? Is Christopher? We need to know all of the things. So here is the link to pre-order now. And the good folks at Murder by the Book, our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore, will send you this book tomorrow as soon as it drops. Peter, I want to thank you for coming on and giving us the inside scoop on Blue Ridge. It's been so fun talking to you about Cillian, Christopher, plot, theater, story Bibles, character Bibles. Oh my goodness, so many things. And getting a look, a tiny peek into your process. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. And thank you everyone that tuned in. These were great questions. Seriously, thank you. Yeah.
Yay. I love my mystery and thriller maven fam. Mystery and thriller people are the best people. So yes, thank you all for spending your Mystery Monday with us. I hope this got your week off to a killer start, and that the rest of the week will fly by as the pages of a good book do, and then it won't be too painful. I will see you next Monday. Until then, Margaret saying, thank you, Peter and Sarah and new friends. This is one for my new diary. Ooh, Margaret, I
love it.
I liked it. All right, y'all, that is a wrap. Pre-order the book tonight, and I will see you next Monday. Take very good care until then.